Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the BBPA Ask a Professional. Happy New Year for those of you who are just joining us for the first time in 2024. I do want to take an opportunity before I invite our very special guest today, Stephania Varalli. We'll speak with you in a moment, but our audience members who's taken the time to join us this afternoon or this morning, can we just get a quick hello in the chat? Let me know where you're joining from. I am always so thrilled to be a part of these sessions. I always leave feeling more enriched, fulfilled even. So I'm always happy to be here, but let us know where you're joining from. And we would love your feedback as well at the end, if that's okay. So I do see, let me just check our chat, and let me also just check to see who has joined us. Let me see if I see any familiar faces. Cherie, welcome. Demelier, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Denise, Dennis, Ebby, Francis, welcome. Karen Johnson, Carrie Lee Bertrand, Michael, welcome. Are you still in warm Jamaica? I hope you are. Nadine, Oakley, Richelle, Roxanne, welcome, welcome. Steve, and I see Tian Marie, Virginia Bailey, and yes, Clean. Again, I am thrilled. If you've never met me before, my name is Moy Fung from Barbados. Hello, Barbados. Good morning. And Catherine from Toronto. My name is Moy Fung, and I get to host these incredible sessions at the BBPA Ask a Professional, where we get to speak with industry experts so that we can level up, not just in business, but in all aspects of our lives. So today we have this amazing guest. Her name is Stephania Varalli, and she is going to be sharing her time with us and her expertise with us today, discussing the art of storytelling. Now, Stephania, if you can just join me on the virtual stage, what I'll do is I'll read your bio, and then I'd like to chat with you for a little bit, okay? Yes, yes. And please, a warm welcome to Stephania. She's a story strategist, a writer, and a speaker. She helps entrepreneurs set themselves apart with storytelling. A serial entrepreneur herself, she honed her expertise in copywriting, branding, and content marketing through 20 years of varied experiences, including helping to turn a local newsletter startup into Canada's top lifestyle site for women, crafting copy for Fortune 500 brands while in search of the world's most remote freelance office, and creating a digital media strategy for her social enterprise that doubled revenue, grew the community nearly 2,000%, and led to acquisition in 2022. Sorry, I'm snapping over here, Stephania. She's now entirely focused on her greatest passion, working with people who are brilliant at what they do to find clarity and share their stories. Stephania, I spoke with you recently and I was absolutely just blown away. I left feeling so inspired. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking today.
How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I mean, it's wonderful to be focusing on what I consider to be my life's passion, and I've turned it into my work and my business. And so I'm really excited to be able to share with anyone that I can to help them find their own story.
Absolutely. And we're so thrilled to have you here. And we discussed about the business landscape, how it's changed so drastically within the last 5 years even. And when I first started out 17 years ago, we weren't really about storytelling and digital marketing and all of that, but storytelling has become such a huge part in how we do life and how we do business nowadays, right? So I'd like you to share just a little bit before you get started. I do have some questions for you, and I know you have a couple slides that you'd like to share, but the art of storytelling, you always talk about it being a gift. Tell us a little bit about that gift and when you first discovered that gift.
Well, it's interesting to me that storytelling is now kind of a buzzword, and it really started, as you said, coming on the scene a couple of years ago, where suddenly everybody started talking about storytelling like it was new. And the fact is, humans have been telling stories since forever. It's actually the way that we like to share information. It's the way that we like to connect. It's such an important part of who we are. The way that storytelling has really changed, I think, in the last few years is that now we have so many different things, different avenues for telling that story. And in today's modern world, especially when we now all have, or most of us have, smartphone access to the internet, people will find your story before you've even met them, because your story is out there. So it's really an interesting thing to me to be able to talk to people about really what does their story mean and what does storytelling mean in the context of business strategy, because whether you like it or not, in your client's mind, you have a story. And so you have to curate that story for them.
Absolutely. Can we just ask you about your first inspiration? We know we talked about a family member from Italy. I'd love to hear that story. Then you can take the virtual stage and share your presentations. We'll come back and answer some questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an uncle. He's since passed away. My uncle Donato. I called him Zio because my whole family is actually Italian immigrants. So everyone's Zio and Zia and Nonno and Nonna. And this particular uncle, I mean, the way that it was sort of done after the war, you'd send one family member over, they try, with basically nothing, they try and figure something out, and the rest of the family starts coming. So this uncle ended up living in the States. And while I was growing up as a kid, he would come and visit. And even though I was quite young at the time, he passed away when I was a teenager, I can still remember the smell of his pipe smoke. And I can still remember the most incredible stories that he would tell me and my sister. And I, even as a kid, found it interesting that he always seemed to have some new sort of thing going on. Like he would come back and say, here's my new restaurant. And one time he showed up literally with a cooler box full of live crabs from Maryland. I think he had become a crab dealer. I was a kid. I didn't really understand it. I just remember watching how hilarious it was to watch crabs scurrying around my driveway. When I was an adult, that's when I really made the connection that the reason that my uncle, who had, no, he didn't have a high school education, he didn't have all of those things, but he knew how to tell a story. He was good at storytelling. And more than that, he was good at story selling, which is using those stories to get across a message to convince someone else to do something that you want them to do. And I don't say that in a way that you have to be, fake or phony. I say that as he had the gift to communicate his message well enough that people could understand it and get on board. Now, my presentation, it's called The Art of Storytelling and not The Art of Story Selling, because when I came up with that, I Googled it and found out that I'm not the first clever person to come up with story selling. So that's not what it's called, but it really is about that. It's about using your stories to communicate your message. And I really like talking about what does that actually mean to people, because I want everyone to leave with tools to use their own story to get their messages across.
And that's incredible. We really appreciate that. And as an entrepreneur, and with my experience and just seeing other entrepreneurs, oftentimes we're very good at what we do, but mostly we are not good at sharing that story behind what we do. So without further ado, Stephania, go ahead and share your slides and we'll come back. I do have a few questions for you. And I'll just alert the audience members now, please, at any given time, put your answer or your questions in the chat rather, and Stephania will be more than happy to answer them. Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead, Stephania.
Fantastic. So I'm not going to start with slides up. I really want to make sure that we're having a connection. And I'm going to start my presentation about storytelling in what might seem like an odd place with science. And the reason I do that is because it's very important for people to understand why storytelling is so important and how it's actually working with respect to your clients and what's going on in their brain. There's a really excellent book that I can recommend, or go Google the summary of it, called Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a book that was written by a psychologist who actually won the Nobel Prize in economics because he was able to demonstrate how people made decisions, especially under parts where they had uncertainty wrapped into those decisions. The way that he explains it in the book is with two systems. You have system 1 and system 2. System 1 is the part of your brain that is very, very fast, almost instantaneous. It works on instinct. It is pulling out everything you've ever done in your life as learned lessons and drawing on that information to make its choices. And it is kind of running the show most of the time. Both are always on. System 2 is our rational part of our brain. It's the place in your brain where complex decisions go to get made. It can analyze, but it is slow. It also takes a lot of energy. Now, the reason why Kahneman was able to win a Nobel Prize with this is because most people thought with economics that people made their purchase decisions very rationally. They thought system 2 would be the one in charge. And in fact, I find most people still think that's the case. They think that if they are able to list out their product features and show that their product features are better than this company's product features, they're going to win the game. But you have to understand how it works. System 2 is in charge maybe 5% of the time. System 1 is running around the world, taking in information, and it says, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what I think we should do. System 2, what do you think? System 2 generally likes to give the nod. System 1 finds that information and passes it on to System 2 with a story. And what it's looking for is the most convenient and clear story it can find. It actually cares less about whether the facts are true, whether it has a complete story. It just wants fast, quick, easy decisions. So when System 1 is in charge, lobbing up ideas to System 2, it's looking for that story. System 2 will come on, as I said, when the decision gets complex. But don't think that System 1 isn't willing to make complex decisions itself. It is very confident. It has the confidence of a teenage boy with a fresh haircut. It will go into a big problem and say, yep, I got this. When it's novel, System 2 comes on board, but what it does is it creates all of the options. It will go through that product list. It will figure out companies or products or people, depending on the situation that you're going to evaluate. But then once it's done, it's very slow, hard, energy-sucking job. It's going to say, hey, System 1, I've got all of my options. Here are the pros and cons. How do you feel about it? You cannot separate System 1 and System 2. So even if they get to that point where they're actually going to give a complex response to the question, you still have to convince System 1. And System 1 just wants an easy, plausible, quick story. If you don't believe me, there was another great scientist, he was actually a neuroscientist, who studied people who had particular types of brain damage that essentially cut them off from System 1. They were very good at coming up with all of the options. They would pass any IQ test you gave them, but they couldn't make a decision. They got literally frozen at the stage of, here are the options, how do you feel? Because they could not connect with that. So let's go into this whole presentation with the understanding that you must tell a story, because that is how every single human, every single person you're trying to convince is going to be judging you by that story. So what is the story? That's the next big thing. A lot of people, when I say I'm going to be talking about storytelling, kind of get into their mind this idea of once upon a time. Or they look up storytelling and they find things that guide them through, the hero's journey or the Pixar method. All of those things are great. But your story is so much more than just you telling your story. Your story is so much more than just the long form content pieces or the social media posts. Your story is everything that the client experiences that feeds into their story about you. It is your website, it's your social media presence or lack thereof. It is how you treat a customer when you interact with them. It is when you sit down in a job interview, what do you actually say? It is every single thing that feeds into the story of you. Now, at this point, I'm going to pull my presentation up. Because there's one thing about stories that I find people in the world of business, when they're thinking of storytelling from a business perspective, they most often get wrong. Your story, oh, I have to remember to point backwards. Your story is about you, but it is not for you. I'm putting this up on the screen because I want everybody to write it down or lock it into their brain. Make sure system one, repetition is great for system one. Get this going. Your story is about you, but it is not for you. Because as much as I've talked about how your customers are all evaluating your story, they don't actually care about your story. What they care about is how your story fits into their story. Everyone is the main character in their own show. Everyone is walking around evaluating these stories, not because they think you are amazing or exciting or awesome, but because they want to know how you fit into their story. There's another interesting book called Story Branding that talks about this in that sort of context of a hero's journey. And he says a great way to position yourself is not as the main character, but as the guide. You are the Yoda to their Luke Skywalker. You are the person that shows up when that character, that main character, that client is experiencing a problem and says, I've got a solution for you. You've got to show them that you've got the authority and the empathy to prove you're the right solution. But if you can do that well and become a part of their story as that helpful guide, they will follow you down that path in whatever path you're trying to take them to wherever they are trying to go, to their happy conclusion. So how do we do this well? Again, if you Google it, you will find a lot of things that tell you about how to tell a good story. But I really want to focus on storytelling from a business perspective. So I have my 4 pillars that I use whenever I'm building out a story for a client. Again, I'm putting them up on screen because I want to make sure that everybody has these down. I'm going to go through them and explain what each of them means. But clear, unique, relevant, and authentic are the 4 things that you need to be worrying about and judging every single story that you produce on. This applies to your main story too. Clear, unique, relevant, authentic. I put them in this particular order because this is absolutely the order in which you need to be focusing on. Clarity is the #1 thing that will win over a customer. If you have a clear story, you will beat out a person who has a more unique story, but doesn't know how to tell it. So what is actually clarity? Well, a lot of things can feed into clarity. Some of it is not using jargon. It's difficult sometimes for experts because they know so much about their field that when they talk to a customer, they can't imagine what it's like being somebody who kind of knows nothing. So make sure that when you're actually writing down copy for your website or doing a pitch, don't try and dazzle them with all the stuff that you know. Your job as the guide is to take all that you know and make it clear for your audience, clear for your customer. Imagine that underneath every single one of these words. Another trap people fall into with clarity, data dumping. Imagine going to a web page that has a giant paragraph of copy. Especially now, we tend to recoil. It's just too much. If you're in the restaurant industry, menu designers will tell you, don't put more than 7 items under each category. Because what happens is that they will go to your menu, they will become instantly overwhelmed. And what does our brain do when we're overwhelmed? We just stick with what we did last time. We just keep ordering the same thing. So if you're trying to convince a customer to pick you over whoever they're working with now, don't data dump. Just make it clear. Uniqueness. This is the next stage down on your podium. When I talk about uniqueness, I want to make sure that people don't feel like they have to turn their story into something that says they are the special snowflake. They're the only one in the world. Nobody else can do what I do. We live in a world with billions of people, and we live in a world with internet access where we can Google what we need, and there will absolutely be other people who have a similar story to you. But when I talk about uniqueness, I try and position it as what are the table stakes for your industry and what sets you apart from them? Table stakes are the buy-in. It's what every client is looking for when they are trying to decide whether or not they should be purchasing your product or your service or hiring you. They're the requirements of the job. Italian immigrant, I'm going to use another story. I always buy olive oil. And when I go buy olive oil, I'm looking for extra virgin olive oil, first cold press. Those are my table stakes. But there's a lot of places that offer those things. So when you're thinking about uniqueness, consider what makes you rise above the table stakes and apart from your closest competitors. What can differentiate you from the people who your potential clients will be judging you against? Relevance. Now, when I get into relevance, this is the part where you are turning your story into that moment of where have you been all my life? When somebody goes to your website and reads through your copy and says, this is exactly what I was looking for, like it's some sort of magical sign. There's a few things you have to remember about relevance. It's something that comes in often at the end of your copy journey or end of your story journey. You absolutely have to nail the table stakes. You have to show them the benefits of those. But relevance will come in when you show your potential customers that you understand what they want and what they fear. Show empathy. Demonstrate that you get them. There's a lot of ways you can do that. And a lot of people are very good at doing that in person. So if you're in a business where you've got client interactions, think about what you do to connect to your clients in person and how can you express that in your digital story. Familiarity works great for relevance. Our system one brain that's just relying on everything we've done before to give it guidance really loves familiar things. If you can understand your client to the level of, I know what they're going to be excited about, drop that in. The other thing you have to remember about relevance is if it is not relevant, do not include it anywhere. I don't care if you have the most amazing talent. If it is not relevant to your client, don't put it in. Because all you are doing is creating noise. What wins? My hand is raised. Clarity. Clarity wins. Noise is fighting with clarity. So when you're thinking about relevant things, if you have a paragraph on a page or a line of copy or a social media post where you can't explain to yourself why I'm doing this, you probably shouldn't be doing it. Okay, let's get into authenticity. Now, when I bring up authenticity, I want to make it clear, I am not suggesting that anyone on this call, or I mean, there are people in the world that do this, but anyone here is gonna lie about what they can do. Let's just assume that nobody is faking credentials or pulling Elizabeth Holmes and making billions of dollars off a product that doesn't work. Let's all assume we're at that level. You absolutely must be at that level. Never lie. It will bite you back quickly. Never lie. When I talk about authenticity, I'm also not talking about being authentic to you. This is about your client. Although when you are working in your authentic space, it will be way easier to find and tell your story. People come alive when they are doing their authentic work, as I do when I talk about stories. What I'm really talking about, though, with this type of authenticity is authenticity for your clients. And there are two ways or two things you have to think about in that. If it is a current client, They are judging your authenticity on whether you deliver on the promises you made them before they became your client. That's it. They're going to say, this is what they said they would do, and this is what they are actually doing. And if there is a gulf between them, you will quickly lose that client. Don't promise anything you can't deliver. And if something goes wrong where for some reason you can't, make sure that you're addressing it and explaining it. What about potential clients? Potential clients who haven't experienced your product or been in a room with you or have any idea about whether what you're doing is actually what you're going to end up doing. So what potential clients are going to do is they're going to start searching for signals of authenticity. Signals of authenticity. They're going to try and find things to show that they can trust that what you're going to do will match up with what you say you do. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can have signals for authenticity. One of the greatest and easiest ways to do it is just through consistency. If you have a consistent message on all of your platforms, across your website, people will believe it more. Stick with consistency and you will win. Now, there are other markers that you can do, things to show markers of authenticity. Adding some humanity into the mix if it suits your brand is a great way. If you do not have your profile picture up on your LinkedIn right now, run, don't walk, and add it. Because people are going to go to your profile, not see a picture, and how's that going to make them feel? Why is this person hiding their face from me? What have they got to hide? And even if you are the most honest, amazing, wonderful person, they don't know that story. They don't know you. They are judging you on the story that you have, unfortunately, like all of us have in the digital world, presented out there. So make sure you are doing things that have markers of authenticity so that your clients are going to believe you. Okay, so we have our 4 pillars: clear, unique, relevant, authentic. What do we do with these? The first place I always tell people to start is with understanding what is their unique value proposition. I like to call it a core message because, as I said, with uniqueness, it doesn't mean you're the only one. It just means you've got the story. And when I talk to people about a unique value proposition, I tell them it is really only the answer to one question. Why you? Why you? Why you? Every client that is making every decision, every hiring manager, every single person that is trying to decide between you and doesn't matter how many other options, but usually they keep that once you get to the consideration part, not a big group. And they're going to say in their mind, as they look at all of their choices, why you? Why you? Why you? Storytelling, when you do it well, answers that question. Every message you put out should be trying to give evidence to the answer to that question. Why you? Now, there are millions different of ways that you can get to that storytelling part to understand how to answer that question, why you? I am working on a worksheet for everyone that I will hopefully have up on my site soon. But to give you an idea of how to get started, what you want to do is think about, what do you have to offer? Don't try and narrow it down yet. Give yourself the full deck of cards. Is there a niche that you can focus on that you have experience in? Do you have a certain type of approach? Is there an offering with your particular services, your particular skill set that is different than what other people are doing in your space? Or do you have an amazing story? You can build an entire brand on an amazing story. Now, when you're thinking of all those 4 things, and I encourage you, write it down on a piece of paper, start filling it out. When you do, though, I want you to remember, if you can't prove it, don't write it down. You cannot create a story on something that you cannot show your clients to be true. Because the rule of storytelling, show me, don't tell me. If you want to be putting on your website that you are innovative, or in your bio that you're a compassionate leader, come up with the receipts. How can you prove that part of your story? Now, that doesn't mean everything has to go in your bio or everything has to go on your website. I use those examples because that is the base house that every business owner should have. You should have a good bio. You should have a good website. When you're at that level of why you, thinking of all the things that you could possibly do that is your unique gifts, that's when you start bringing in, who are you trying to sell this to? Because you're not asking why you, your clients are. So start thinking about your client. What do they want? What do they need? What are their, table stakes in that industry? What are they hoping for? Whatever information you can add about your client is going to help you clarify the story that will answer that question. I also suggest that people go check out who would be their 5 closest competitors, or 3, depending on the industry, depending on what you're trying to sell. There are so many different rules around this, but go look at what they're talking about. Now, you don't have to make an exhaustive giant matrix of all of their, it's not a SWOT analysis. We don't need their strengths and their weaknesses. We need to know what their story is. Because if you were trying to sell something in the exact same way that your competitors are trying to sell it, you will not be unique. If you do it more clearly than they do, you can still win. So keep that in mind. But let's start from trying to nail all of these 4 things. And how are you unique from your competitors, serving your clients, and proving all of those stories? Once you've found that story thread that connects what you do best with what your clients want, and it is unique from your competitors in a perfect world, you will have the answer to why you. And there are so many answers to that. Don't think of it like a headline. Most times when I ask someone, have you figured out what your UVP is, or your core message, they give me a clever headline. That's not going to help you. Your UVP is your North Star. It should be very, very, very clear to you. What your clients are going to see is the story you tell that brings that UVP to life. So how are you going to do that? Let's get into the actual nuts and bolts. I've built something that I like to call Stephania's, I keep pointing the wrong way, Stephania's story pyramid. So this is really helpful. Again, I like to focus on websites and bios because they're the most sort of universally important thing, but you can apply this to almost anything where you're having a client interaction. When your clients are dealing with you, they're going to ask a series of questions. I made it a pyramid because I want you to understand the top of the pyramid is the first and most important question. And you have this much space and time to get it across. Tiny little triangle. If we're talking about your website, you've got about 5 seconds to answer the question, what do you do? So this absolutely should be in your headline, the biggest piece of copy on your page. Often it needs a little subhead or maybe a little paragraph, but you really don't have a lot of space or time to say, what do you do for me? And if you don't say that quickly and clearly, System 1, which loves to just jump to conclusions to get things done fast, will immediately remove you from its options. You cannot expect your clients to work hard to figure out what you do. So say you've passed that test. You've told them clearly, I offer X, here's the happy end state we're going to take you to, and you've got that first question down. The next thing they're going to want to know is, are you right for me? This is when they're going to start looking at things like the benefits that you offer and the features that you offer. If you're not clear about the difference between a feature and a benefit, look at it this way. A feature is sort of that product feature. You know, I'm looking for a TV with X. I actually know nothing about TVs. You know, I want a screen to be this resolution pixels. That's the feature. The benefit is it will bring your stories to life. It's when someone sees the feature and asks the question, why do I care? Most of the time, your clients will not understand anything on the features list, but they will understand the benefits, and the benefits will speak to the story. There's a lot of other things that come into the "Are you right for me?" question when you start getting into that world of relevance, where I talked about putting in the nudges that awaken that little part of their brain that feels, familiar, feels connected, feels relatable. That's all going into "Are you right for me?" The next part of the pyramid, huge. Everything else on your website is, why should I trust you? Why should I trust you? Why should I trust that you are going to do what you said you do? You have to prove your unique value proposition. And depending on what product you're offering, who you're talking to, there are so many different ways to prove that. Why should I trust you? The stories you use to make that part of the pyramid come to life must be directly connected to your unique value proposition. If you're telling people that your UVP is all up, well, not telling yourself your UVP, the answer to why you is that I have the best customer service, then you better have testimonials on your website, because you've got to prove that you've delivered the best customer service without them being a customer, without them knowing you. Final layer. How do I get started? It's thin because it's not a lot of words, but it is everywhere. This is such an easy mistake to make. If your customer comes to your website and absolutely loves your story, has that moment of, where have you been all my life? But they have no idea what to do next. Are they supposed to call you? What's the process? Is there a website somewhere hiding? Did you forget to put your address? Make it abundantly easy and clear what the next step is and how they should take it. Your client must know how to get started, because if you make it hard, you are forcing their brain that does not want to waste calories figuring it out. If you confuse, you lose. Clarity trumps everything. Now, you can apply the same period to your bio, which people often think, well, that's not really how a bio goes. But what do you do is the number one question they're asking. And it's not just a job title. It's, what's the unique value that you offer? But it can be at least just a job title. The metaphor or the example I like to give to people is, if you were to go into a bakery and say, hi, I would like a piece of chocolate cake. If the person behind the counter said, oh, we've been open since 1999. I learned how to bake cakes from this really great school. What are you not telling them? If you have chocolate cake, they want to know quickly and clearly in that first sentence, what do you do? Throw in that unique value that you offer. Because most people, and you've got to remember this, are not going to read your whole bio. They are not going to read your whole website. I'm sure it's gotten worse. The last stat I found was less than 17% of people are actually checking all the pages on a website. Most of them are going to your homepage and your about page. Most of them are just skimming, reading headlines, maybe stopping at some bullet points, getting the first sentence somewhere. But you have to make sure you're communicating your story in such a quick, clear way that they get the story without having to read everything. The more information you try and stick in someone's brain, the more work they need to do. So if you are trying to give them the whole story at once, you have not earned that time yet. You have not earned the energy it takes for their system to brain to fire up and figure out something new. Now, when you're going through your pyramid, don't forget the pillars. Do I have clarity? Is there something unique in here? Is this relevant to my client? And have I shown through signals authenticity? And you will meet all of those goals. I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I feel I've gotten to the point where I should probably start taking questions or we're going to be running out. So hopefully this gives you a good start. And again, I'm going to be trying to be putting things on my website that can give you an actual matrix to start to figure out your UVP. And I'm always open to questions if anybody, well, right now, certainly, but if anybody thinks of something afterwards, you can email me, look at my website, stephaniavaralli.com. It should be on my slide, and you can ask me questions anytime.
That was incredible. Thank you so much, Stephania. And I'm sure, as I do, many of you might have questions, right, for Stephania. I believe it feels like you've given a masterclass. That's what it feels like. So much information within the last 45 minutes, and it's useful information. And what I do think, you mentioned earlier about storytelling being for the art, developing the art of storytelling. It's actually for the customer. It's not for us.
It's
But
about you. It's not for you. That's your thing. About you, not for you.
But the act of actually creating that story or refining or defining that story, it's for us. I feel like it needs to be, there needs to be a section in our business plan that helps us to, right, to get that clarity around who we are, our value proposition. That's incredible. I see Sarah in the chat that says you are amazing for bio. I see some people writing all their accomplishments and so forth, right? Let me just open up the rest of
That's the number one error that I've helped I've helped with so many bios. So many bios. And the number one error that I see in bios is that people think your bio is the place where you write down everything that you have done. Everything you have done. No, nobody cares. Nobody cares that I'm good at crosswords. They only care about how my story will serve their story. And so you must curate your bio to match the client you are trying to win. And if you can manage that, that's when it says, oh my God, where have you been all my life? That's where you want to get.
Sarah, I guess that answers your question, Sarah. She wanted to know if you list all your accomplishments, if you won this award and all of that, is that a good thing to do? And what you're saying is no.
I actually have written an article, and I'll get it up on my site soon, about how you can check your bio to see if it's actually working for you. And one of the things that I always tell people to do with their current bio is go through and assign a job to every line. If you have a line about an award you've won, I want you to think in your brain, what does that say? And if you can't, not to you, to your clients, to the people you're trying to win over, if you cannot say why that line is serving your why you story, that line should not be there. Also, if you're the kind of person who's, I've worked with people who've won so many awards. I've worked with people who've got so much experience or have lots of things. They're not really sure. So they just list everything as one big blob of text. Think about ways that you can connect. If they all serve your story, think about ways you can connect those dots, find the pieces, and introduce it almost like it's its own category. I've won several awards, including what you do there is you serve the part of people's brains where they want to have the simple, quick answer. Their brain's going to see, I've won a bunch of awards, and they might not, probably not, read the whole sentence, but they will see you as someone who has won several awards. And then make it really tailored. Think about what you want to highlight as, where do I want to go? I've worked with executives who have told me, you know what? I love my job. What I really want to do is this. If you want to be a speaker, have your bio talk about the speaking you've done, even if you've done it twice. I have spoken at events. It's not lying. Never lie.
Yes.
Everything must be true and provable. But in the same way that we curate our resume for the job that we're looking for, curate your bio for where you want to go.
Thank you so much for that. Michael Pinnock, I'm just getting to the chat. He says, simplicity is the name of the game. And he says, what does that look like? Are you asking a question, Michael? So what does that look like?
What does simplicity? Okay, so there's two big things. And when I look for a website copy that I do help people, I'll go to your website and I'll tell you what's wrong with it and then help you fix it. What I look for is the headline just trying to be clever? Or if you're writing a content piece, I have so many clients say, can we come up with like a really clever headline, you know, that has like rhyming words or don't be clever. If you're writing a content piece to go on the internet, to be in the blog of your site, don't be clever. Make the title exactly what you are going to deliver. Why you should do X. 10 reasons to do this. Actually, it's better to not use even numbers. Our brains are so weird. There's so many things in our brains. But having that simple, clear thing, don't try and make it something where you're writing the greatest copy line ever. Just make it clear. You will win on clear before clever. Now, there are certainly ways to be clever and clear. So I'm not saying don't try and do it, but if you're doing it yourself and you're not a master of wordplay, just go for clear. The easy, I'm telling you literally exactly what I do. People will like that more than your clever headline.
Certainly. Thank you so much. And I do have a hand that is up, but I do want to just, if you don't mind, let me just get to the questions quickly in the chat. Virginia says, curating is so hard. I feel you, Virginia. Is there anything more important for women to keep in mind when telling a story? And there's another question, or there's two other questions as well, before we get to Namdi.
Yeah, and getting that curated part, I totally understand, because especially, I always say, start from a place of abundance. When you're writing down what you can do, like what experience do you have, what products can you offer, what are those, you know, that the categories that I mentioned before, I will get this up on my site soon. Put everything in there. But then what you're trying to do is say, okay, one, what pieces connect? Because your story can't be a manifesto. Your story can't be everything you do. Sometimes you've got to drop out the things that you're super proud of. I spent 6 years editing an adventure magazine on adventure sports and travel. That's not in my speaker's bio because it's less relevant than the other things that I have done. So think about what's your best card to put forward. What's your what's going to sell the story more? We do this instinctively when we meet people often. You know, we know our best stories. We know what makes people light up. If you're unsure, think about how your clients talk about you. Think about how you talk about yourself when you go to a, networking event and you've got to say your blurbs. What comes out first? And if you want to try it out, I try lines out IRL in real life all of the time. I think of something in my head and then I just start dropping it in to random conversations. And you will know you have landed on something that wins when someone goes, oh yeah, I'll get it. It's clear, it's unique, it's relevant. You will know when you've got that. So just test it out there. But think about, again, what you can prove and what resonates with your client. When you've got that list, put your clients' wants and needs and draw lines, see what matches up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We only have a couple minutes left, but I do want to just get to the comments. The 4 pillars: outstanding presentation, effective storytelling is the key to selling your skills, services, and products. Yes, Clean says, I think you've just answered it in what you just said. Does it help if to be tied to a cause? I'm not sure
Oh,
if you want to make a quick comment on that.
this is more, well, I don't know if you're talking about like specifically related to a client or personally. I think we all do our best work when we are passionate and believe in what we're doing.
Yeah.
I do storytelling, and I'm doing this because I fully believe that stories change the world. I fully believe that everyone in the world deserves to have the knowledge of how to tell their story well, because that shouldn't be what makes them lose. If they can't do the work and they can't give a good product, okay, someone beats you on the product or someone beats you on the heart, fine. But you shouldn't lose because you can't tell your own story. Everyone deserves that right. I'm doing what I can to make it simple so that everybody has that right. That's my cause. If you're speaking about this in the relationship of having a cause tied to your product story, your business storytelling, yes. One of the pillars that I tell people to think about when they are writing down, trying to get to their UVP, is their personal story. Your personal story can have so much power in it. I didn't get into the whole part of what stories actually do with respect to your brain, but it releases chemicals that make us feel more connected, that make it does so many good things. You can tell your story and that will win everything. Olive oil, I'll make it quick. The olive oil that I end up buying, that I end up choosing, if I tell you the last 3 olive oils that I bought, every single one of them had either a family farm story, or literally the one in my cupboard right now has a bunch of pictures of old Italian men staring lovingly at grapes. Because you know why? Because I love olive oil. They all kind of taste the same to me. What I'm really scared about is that I'm going to get fake olive oil. So the value that I'm looking for is a story that I can trust. They want on story. Think about what your clients are looking for. That will tell you what that story, why you, that will tell you how to get there.
Perfect. Thank you. Namdi, are you able to unmute yourself and ask your question? Thank you, Stephania, for that. If we can unmute Namdi, you had your hand up. It's not up anymore. Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephania. Excellent presentation. I just wanted to ask, given that our clients have 2 sides of their brain, right? From my understanding, it's more the rational side and the more emotional side,
Yeah.
right? Does it matter how long we spend telling the story?
So there is definitely what I call I like to call it walking the clients down the garden path. When you first have an interaction with the client, like I said, the top of that pyramid, what you do, it's so small. Like you've got to get in the door with that. And you don't need a ton of copy or a huge long story. And unless you are like a brilliant storyteller, sometimes I don't suggest to people, don't try and go out and become the guy that's in the corner with everyone around them hearing the story. What you want to do is just come up with the short, clear story that speaks in general to your clients and explains what you do. Then that building trust portion is where you start finding the bigger stories that serve that purpose. So for example, if you have on your website something that talks about how your approach is about really teaching people how to do things well, then once you've got that on your site, I would suggest you should have a section where you're writing expert advice articles and you're taking all of your brilliant knowledge and you're simplifying it. That's a much longer story. But if you haven't got the first story done, that short, quick, here's what I offer, this is why me, then don't start worrying about the next phase of the story. To get longer, to get into bigger, deeper things, you've got to earn that time and that brain space. So start short, start clear. Start with just, this is what I do, here's why me. Then start building out the longer pieces that say, why should I trust you?
Thank you so much for that. We have about a minute left, Stephania. I'm going to get to this last question here by Tian Marie. She says, thank you so much. Excellent presentation. Why shouldn't we use numbers in our post? Example, 5 ways to.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, it's not. So there's a specific thing. There are so many. If you actually Google what are our cognitive biases, you will get like an alphabetized list of all of the things that really show you how your brain, we are not rational, we are good at rationalizing. Our brain takes so many shortcuts and so many biases, you have no idea. When you start getting into it, it's like, I don't make decisions at all. I'm just going off crazy stuff. It's just proven in posts, and you can Google this and find it, that having, I think it was 7 items on your list of, if I'm giving you like my top tips, 7 tips for some reason sparks our brain better than having 10 tips, having an even number. It's like how all prices, like, well, first all prices ended in 99 cents because our brain, even though it was a 1 cent difference, thought that the thing that was $10 was so much more than $9.99. Well, now we all know that. So now there's actually, now people do $9.79 because then it's like, oh, actually, no, they're not just fake. They're not trying to trick me with this 99-cent stuff. It's actually a legit, that's really the value. So there's so many little tricks about understanding how you can tap into the way that their system one brain is working. But build the house before you landscape the yard. That's what I tell people. Don't worry about all of that until you have nailed your story. Nail that story, that's what's going to win.
Awesome. Michael says, excellent topic and well presented. I would agree. Dennis, thank you. That was great. So relevant to all business. And Virginia says, thank you, Stephania. Really great content and storytelling. It's been such a pleasure, Stephania. We hope to have you again.
I would clearly, I could go on for, I have a part 2, so I could clearly do this forever. Thank you. I feel so loved. Thank you so much, everyone.
On behalf of the BBPA, we just want to extend warm thanks to you for your time that you've dedicated with us today. To our audience members who's been so active in the chat, we thank you. And please do join us every Wednesday for Ask a Professional.